up.
Well, I'll say that. I want to say this.
It's very common, actually. The Beatles probably had a few people kill themselves over it.
I think the worst part about teens who kill themselves, and this is getting morbid again.
Yeah, here we go. Teens who kill themselves.
The worst part is, teens are inherently a little cringy. They're still trying to
emotionally unstable.
Yeah, they're trying to figure themselves out. They don't really understand the world. And there's a lot of cringe things they do. And when a lot of them kill themselves when they... I keep using... This is one example I keep thinking about. This kid, he put on a Blink-182 song in his room. Like a cringy...
Feeling it?
What?
Feeling it?
Is it the name of the song? I don't know. He put on a Blink-182 song.
Why'd you pick that one, Corey?
It's Christmas Eve.
Really cringy. And then he hung himself in his room. And I can just imagine how...
If he was
the EMTs coming in and rolling their eyes at this whole situation, they're like, "Oh my god, another one of these."
Do you know a kid on my block where I used to live hung himself with his shoelaces?
So if you're gonna kill yourself,
be cool about it.
Yeah, don't do it in a way where everybody's gonna be embarrassed about it.
No, like get a cool football jacket.
Yeah,
eat a steak. Throw some football around.
Yeah, at least do it in a way where people are like, all right.
Some respect and dignity.
So, you hang yourself with a smile on your face with, some cool sunglasses on. You have six cigarettes in your mouth. No one would expect that.
Don't do it in a cringy internet way, because everybody's going to laugh at you. Everybody's going to be like,
it's not cool. It's not
going to be mocking
what's in your head does not translate well. It's not going to come out anything.
Research and find, what's cool now. Like Little Wheezy. Have Little Wheezy playing when you hang yourself.
I think what we need is a nice list of timeless ways to kill yourself. Not killing yourself. Ways of killing yourself are almost like tattoos. They go out of fashion. In a few years, people think back. They're like, "Oh man, the way he killed himself,
so lame, dude.
So boring.
That's hilarious." I was like, they laugh, they joke about it.
That's horrible. Those people are horrible.
You should put out a book, nice and fancy, just like
write a book,
a manual.
Write a book called "The Appropriate Ways to Kill Yourself."
Yeah,
and then as suggested by the Sleepy Cat.
You don't want the way you kill yourself to go out of style for at least 50 years. I mean,
you want everyone else who's alive who remembers you to be dead.
But you also want to be considerate of others when you do it.
Yeah, no, you don't want to be a psycho.
You don't want to take anybody out with you.
No,
you don't want to make a mess. I mean, these people. I'll tell you what.
Or maybe you do to make it long lasting. If you walk,
damn Corey, holy fuck!
If you walk into a building blaring Blink-182 holding a dynamite, that's good.
What are the most inconsiderate... let's talk about this. What are the most inconsiderate ways to kill yourself? I think being hit by a train, that makes a big mess.
And it makes everyone late for the thing. You don't want to do that.
I think one of the worst is if you kill yourself in your bathtub and your body is left to sit in that water for
my God.
They don't find you for 3 weeks. That has got to be the worst thing to clean up.
That chick in California who crawled into the water tank and fucking died and ruined everybody's water. What an inconsiderate. It's horrible.
Yeah, you don't want to jump off buildings.
No, look, buy a nice suit, get a press, lay in your bed, put a tarp on the bed. Be considerate. Hey, call the police. Be like, hey, I'm gonna kill myself in 5 minutes. Please send some guys over.
I think the best way.
This is just stupid. Someone's suicidal is probably having a horrible day. They're listening to this joke.
No, they're using this advice.
It's very mafia-like, but just get a boat. Get a cement block, just go out in the middle of a lake and tie yourself to it and just jump off, and everything will be taken care of. The fish will have something to eat.
Yeah.
No cleanup. Maybe somebody will have to retrieve the boat, but that's a small.
Just call beforehand. This boat might be wandering somewhere.
Having water shoved through your esophagus into your lungs and expanding your whole body, expanding all your.
Set the engine to low. Maybe let it just go putter back to shore. And very considerate. Everybody's like,
"Let's go."
What a nice guy. Listen,
the person
he killed himself, but he was very considerate.
The person you borrowed the boat from, the boat's coming up to the shore. He's like, "Oh, he left me a tip." Oh.
Yeah, and put a tip in the boat.
Yeah.
Everybody will think very kind. He didn't want to bother anybody. He went out the best way possible.
Could you imagine that killing yourself?
Unlike Frank, who jumped in from a train and it took 8. We're still finding fingers on the other side of the parking lot.
Could you imagine yourself sitting at the table and someone's all the way in the back, but they put a plastic bag over their head and shot themselves, so the brain matter was in the bag. And then they go to the table and there's a $100 tip, and it was like, "Hey, you were a great waitress. Keep it up." And then
this is getting dark.
Makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside.
This is very, very. This is the darkest, but I think we're giving people a nice public service announcement.
Yeah. If you kill yourself, just be conservative.
Consider it.
Yeah. Don't ruin anybody else's day.
No, don't go flying to buildings. What are you doing, dude? Knock it off. All right, just go jump.
Don't kill yourself.
But don't actually. But if you are going to, do it how Jeff said.
Do it as a practical joke.
Blood is on his hands in the real world. He's a murderer.
Do it as a practical joke.
This has been a humorous Sleepy Cabin segment. Don't kill yourself.
Will you write the suicide note? Name Jeff by name. that's the cause for suicide.
Just draw the Sleepy Cabin skull on the.
Draw Jeff's Twitter icon. Print out Jeff's Twitter icon.
Go on the news and
put it over your tape it to your chest.
Symbols.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Johnny Utah NG at Twitter or whatever.
Yeah.
Please don't do that.
That was Suicide Cooking Fun Time. Join us next time on Sleepycast. Goodbye. Oh yeah, my recipe. Okay, so basically you take a couple human titties and put them in a big pan with potatoes. Then peel over them. Then roast at like 400 degrees for like 2 hours. Bon appetit, my nigga.
Thinking sideways.
I don't understand.
Does not compute.
You never know.
Insufficient data to formulate a reply.
What?
Stories of things we simply don't know the answer to.
Toynbee idea in movie 2001, Resurrect Dead on planet Jupiter, but it's a gas planet and it's like
Devin,
you okay?
What?
What's going on here?
No,
You're acting like
nothing.
Sherlock Holmes on a cocaine bender.
No.
You've got Post-it notes and hastily written notes. What is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you're a little too into this.
What's
we need
the
to back
Post-it
up
note on your forehead for?
The thing is that this is one of those mysteries that so many people have delved into, and I feel like there's like a curse attached to it. Like you just fall into it. It's like it's like how many more metaphors can I come up with here? I really don't know.
Down the rabbit hole?
Yeah.
There you go.
And you just fall in, and there's no, I know I was expressing to Steve earlier that I don't know if I'm really ready for this, just because there's so much information out there. It's been going on for so long.
You were a little
and I
manic.
Can't do anything about it, but I really want to talk about this one because it's like one of my favorite mysteries, and I feel like it's time. But I'm so sorry.
Deep breaths.
I can't.
We'll make it through.
Let's talk about
You're
it.
gonna help me with this?
Yeah, because I admit this one's off.
We're gonna solve it though. Don't you worry.
This one's a little off.
I don't want to solve it. I really want to solve it.
Yeah.
It's the thing. Okay, the thing about this mystery is that it seems like there's just an obvious answer, right? It's one of those ones where you read through it and you're like, well, I'm like an idiot. Like I'm just not making the right connections. Like there should be a really simple answer to this, but there's just not.
Okay.
No.
No, I can see that perspective.
Oh, there is a simple answer. Somebody's making these things and putting them out there.
You're right.
Yeah.
But who and why and what?
Let's start at the beginning for our dear friends who are listening today.
All right.
And don't know what's going on.
All right. I guess. Okay. So.
And what's your name, by the way?
This is Thinking Sideways, the podcast. I'm so sorry, everyone. My name is Devin, and I'm joined as always by
Steve
and Joe.
And we're gonna go at a mystery. By now, you probably know we're gonna do the Toynbee tiles. So these tiles, they're sometimes called plaques, started showing up maybe in the early 1980s. Definitely people can pretty solidly recall in like 83 these things cropping up, but for sure there were recorded sightings in the early 90s.
Okay. So they've been around a while.
They've been around a while.
They're happening a while, I should say.
I think been around. Because often, a lot of times, they have been around for a while, but sometimes they haven't, and that's kind of...
Well, it could. One of them could be around for a long time before you even notice it. The one that's over near my house at 7th and Hawthorne, which I went and looked at today. It actually is there.
It's still there.
Yeah, it's there. But I've been driving over that thing and past that thing for years now, and never even noticed it.
Never noticed it.
Yeah.
Because they, that's kind of part of it. They crop up in the middle of asphalt streets or sidewalks, but more they crop up in the street, kind of places where you don't necessarily see them. And
right away.
Yeah, and as it's because as it's gotten more recent, it's kind of we see them more in visible pedestrian spaces. We'll talk about this in a little bit. It's a big there's a distinction.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Most of them are just this phrase, Toynbee idea, in movie 2001, resurrect dead on planet Jupiter. The most common variations you'll see are, instead of in movie, it'll say in Kubrick's 2001.
Because he directed it. Mm-hmm. The movie 2001: A Space Odyssey.
And I think he wrote it too, or
he co-wrote it with Arthur Clarke.
Yeah, I was going to say I didn't think he wrote it on his own. Okay.
Yeah.
The thing that's a little mysterious to me is this 2001 Resurrect Dead on Jupiter. I mean, in the movie, they go to Jupiter, but they're not going there to resurrect the dead.
Well, we'll talk about this.
Oh, really?
There's so much to talk about with this thing. So officially, we kind of consider anything that cropped up, not anything, but most of them that cropped up until about 2002 to be old style or original tiles. Mm-hmm. And then since 2002, a lot of copycats have kind of cropped up. You know, the ones here are considered to be copycats. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is due in part to the fact that forums got a hold of, somehow realized how these were being done, and they posted on the internet. So people who were Toynbee tile enthusiasts now knew how they were made, how to make them themselves, and we're kind of going out and copying and propagating the...
Well, it becomes a movement.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Street art, for lack of a better term.
Absolutely.
I'm actually thinking about creating one myself.
I did in college.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did.
Where at?
In Illinois.
Is it still there?
I have no idea.
Get on Google Street View.
No, it's not. It was never on Google Street View. I guess we'll start by talking about how they're made, because that's the simplest thing to attack.
Probably.
In this whole situation, it's the simplest thing to attack. And I understand that this is, again, propagating the mystery a little bit. We're about to say to all of our millions of viewers or listeners.
At least 1% of whom are going to want to run right out
totally.
and do this.
So now you'll know how to do it. Not
because
that
it's
you
so
couldn't,
easy to do.
Yeah, and it's not that you couldn't just Google it.
Yeah, I know.
Before. So they're actually made of linoleum. Linoleum tiles, just like you can buy at Home Depot. Mm-hmm. The theory is, and again, since it's pretty easy to tell, you just carve out your message in the linoleum. And the older style ones were really colorful and kind of looked like mosaics.
Mm-hmm. They were.
And we'll post pictures of these so you can kind of see, but they're really beautiful.
Yeah, they're kind of. But so the older ones, I mean, they had colored the letters in. Mm-hmm. Now, did they just lay the cutout linoleum on top of another piece of material to get the color, or did they actually cut out different colored pieces of linoleum and stick them in there?
Essentially what you do is you put down a piece of tar paper, which is what they use when you're re-roofing, when you put shingles on. And you can just get it at Home Depot or whatever. So you get a layer of tar paper, which they also use to patch cement and asphalt cracks.
True.
Yeah.
You lay that down, and then you would cut out your basic outline. So your main color of the tile. And then you cut out the little bits.
You carve out the letters.
Carve out the little letters and stick them in the holes. Mm-hmm. And then you put a bunch of Elmer's glue on there. And
top
also,
or bottom or both?
All over it. You just it's like making a sandwich.
Yeah, with lots of mayonnaise.
A little bit. Yeah, and you just smother your mayonnaise or jam or whatever it is in there. And then you use asphalt crack filler as well a little bit. And then you stick another layer of tar paper on there. And you've got yourself a little sandwich packet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think to answer Joe's question it took me a while to figure this out. You're talking about the original ones were much more colorful.
Yeah.
Because what somebody was doing was carving the letters out and making a negative space in the linoleum.
And then adding a positive
and
space.
then cutting out another piece of linoleum that was the letter and laying that in there to make the positive.
Yeah, it wouldn't be that hard. Actually, you could use it as a stencil and just basically outline the pieces.
It's extremely time-consuming.
If
you think about that, I carved the letter R, and then I've got to carve the letter R smaller and in relatively the same shape proportionally to fit in there. So if the leg or the curve is too big, I got to go back and shave it down to get them all in there.
And the really interesting thing, the other thing that you kind of notice is as you start to look at the pictures of these tiles, you can kind of instinctively know if it's an original or a copycat because there's really distinct handwriting that goes with the original.
Very obvious style.
It's really, really obvious, and it's really consistent. It's not like an amateur carver. Mm-hmm. And we'll get into this, there are these original trial runs that were found, and you look at them and you're like, oh, that's the guy. Like that was made by the same person.
Well, and there's the screeds, which are just tons and tons of little writing that it's just so much, and it's a very consistent style.
Yeah.
So the style is the key.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
It's like a fingerprint.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, and the guy who does the screeds sounds like a little bit unbalanced.
Well, so yeah, we call those the
manifesto.
I'm in it, you guys. I'm in it. Yeah. They're referred to most often as the manifesto tiles, and we'll talk about that, but a little bit later. But so they've floated this theory that the Tyler, we'll refer to this person as the Tyler. Mm-hmm. You often see that kind of in the net sphere, the info sphere.
We don't have a verified name.
Yeah,
so it's an easy way to refer to the person.
And it's pretty widely accepted that it was just one person. Mm-hmm. So we'll just go ahead and throw that out there in the beginning. There was this theory that the Tyler had a car that was missing a floorboard. So you would drop your little sandwich packet and it would go bloop, and then drive away. And
is that the noise it made?
When I did it.
Oh, okay.
It went bloop. No.
Did you cut a hole in the bottom of your car?
I did not. No, I didn't have a car.
That's good.
There's that whole situation.
So it hits the ground.
So it hits the ground, and then the heat of the tires driving over it kind of embeds it in the asphalt. It just like deep embeds it. And then eventually wears the tar paper part away after all of the like tar and asphalt and glue have solidified into the
and
concrete.
Been pushed around because it's kind of a sticky liquid is the easy way to say it. So it gets pushed away from the base material.
Totally,
on the top.
Yeah, so it all gets embedded and then it'll wear away at the paper. So they just eventually kind of reveal themselves, which is really cool if you think about it, and really ingenious.
Oh, yeah.
Super, super smart.
Yeah, I don't think that I would go to the lengths of cutting a hole in the bottom of my car, though. I think I'd just like roll down my window and drop it out that way.
Yeah,
well, you know, the thing about a car with a hole in the floorboard is nobody plans to have that. But you end up with it. Because I had a car that I discovered had a hole in the floorboard once, and I wasn't planning on having it, but once I had it, I had it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how much I like this theory, to be totally honest with you. There's a
the dropping it through the floorboard thing.
There's a documentary that we're gonna like refer a lot to in this because it's kind of like the end all be all of information on the Toynbee tiles. Mm-hmm. It's called Resurrect Dead, and they talk a lot about this car as it refers to the person that they think is responsible for this.
Did they find the car?
They did not. But they have descriptions of it, and it's a crazy little car. But I think, in some instances that makes sense, but to say that that's how this person exclusively did that, I just don't think that's the case. I just don't.
Can I break in here for a second?
No.
Because this is the thing that we've had a couple of stories where there's been documentaries out there about them. Mm-hmm. I know there was a documentary that was done, and the thing that I want to bring up and make people think about is that when you watch a documentary, they have come to a conclusion typically of what the answer is going to be, at least for the most part. So they're going to bring that stuff to the forefront. And it's a little frustrating to me at times because I don't always agree with it, and I don't always think the logic is sound. And I think that it's very easy for folks to go and, let's say, watch this documentary and say, oh, well, that's the absolute answer. Mm-hmm. But I still see some holes in it. Not that these guys didn't do a ton of legwork.
Oh, my gosh. They did so much legwork.
It was
and
years.
Again, I think, if you watch this movie, you will get exactly the idea of what I was just talking about earlier, is you fall down this rabbit hole. And even, there's an instance where a guy comes in and he's like a total skeptic and he like he's not really into the idea. And by the end of it, he's like one of the only people who's still like involved in the whole situation. And I think I think there is that feeling of thinking, well, there must just be this really simple answer that we're just like that. I'm just too stupid to see.
And that's what drives me crazy sometimes when we see these documentaries, which are well made. I'm not going to knock on them, but
no, of course not.
Then you start thinking about it after the fact. Well, okay, so agenda's not the right word to use, but they have an agenda that they are putting forward, and that's what they're going to support. But that doesn't mean that that's the only or the absolute or correct answer.
Right. Right.
So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I had to say that because we've had this come up a couple of times.
I agree. Yeah, and I think it's worth saying for sure. The theory kind of commonly accepted knowledge is that there's about 150 like old style tiles, originals essentially, that people have identified. And there may be more that nobody's ever seen. They may have gotten destroyed before anybody ever got to see them, because
they get paved over and stuff.
Well, and the thing of it that's really interesting is that it almost seems like it's a really big effort to pave over these things. There have been cities who, like Chicago, for instance.
Which is where the majority of them started out at, right?
No, Philadelphia.
I'm sorry, you're right.
But Chicago saw like 2 of them and they were like, nope, this is a huge act of vandalism. We will do everything we can to pave over them.
And destroy
them. When truly, I mean, it's not destroying the street. Like, if I were a conspiracy theory nut, it would totally feed into my conspiracy theory, because it's like a couple tiles in the middle of the street. It's not like gang graffiti, like written on the side of like some giant tourist trap or anything like that.
And now the government's suppressing it.
Yeah. I mean, a little bit. It costs a lot of money to repave a street. Like, it costs a lot of money to even just repave a tiny little bit of street.
It's not cheap.
And these are just, like, chilling in the middle of the street. They're not, like...
doing anything.
It's not a problem to the infrastructure. It's not dangerous.
Yeah, well,
They're just some little graffitis.
But graffiti on a wall could be thought of the same way, and people don't appreciate it because that's not what that surface is intended for. I understand both sides.
Yeah, totally.
I just have to say.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair, because I don't want to say this is like a conspiracy thing, because if you listen to the show, I'm not a conspiracy person, but I do want to say that the level that some cities have gone to say we're getting rid of this stuff,
to eradicate it,
it's a little crazy. Anyway, so there are 300 like copycats so far that they've seen. And we talked a little bit about what they look like. There's this group called the House of Hades, and they've been credited with at least 100 of the copycats.
Oh, yeah.
And they're the ones who are doing it in Portland.
Yeah.
And the message is different often.
Yes.
It often says something about House of Hades. There's also the Cult of the Hellion, who are kind of the same thing as the House of Hades, and they're doing a lot of copycats as well. But it's just, I mean, you could do it individually. The thing is that to do it individually, it costs a lot of money, because you have to get a whole roll of tar paper, okay? And that's like $50 a pop. And then you got to get linoleum, and then you have to get a different color linoleum, and then you have to invest the time and energy to like carve it, just to have said like, oh, I was like one tiny little part of this movement that somebody may never see. That's not something a lot of people do.
So the Tyler must have been like in home construction. I'm just kidding, but actually that would make sense though.
Maybe, although do like 150 of them.
Well, but if you're working on jobs and you're just collecting scraps, that suddenly affords you this hobby at no cost, but your time.
Yeah, or if you like have a lot of time to like walk around and just like pick up, because you walk up to a roof and you say, "Hey, man, can I have like a little piece of your tar paper?" They're like, "Yeah."
It's in the trash. Take
cool,
it.
Take it.
Leave me alone.
Yeah.
Whatever.
No way.
They don't care, or they don't even notice, or it's late night and you go into a dumpster.
Finger discount.
Not a big deal.
And there's stores where you can actually buy scraps of various things. Like there's one that's not very far away from here that has a lot of stuff like that. You can buy small leftover chunks of stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
because it's recycling to them.
Yeah, and they make a little money off of the whole thing, and it doesn't go into the landfill.
Yeah, for sure. So this is what the House of Hades tiles kind of look like.
I didn't ever get the connection, and maybe that's just because I missed it. But is the House of Hades something to do with the original tiles, or is it just some offshoot group that just picked it up and took it?
No, it's an offshoot group, and you can see they're very clearly made with. We'll post pictures, of course. They're very clearly made with just like single tiles or double wide of just a floor tile. They just went to like Home Depot or something.
About a 1 by 1 or
And
whatever.
so this one reads, Theirs Often Do, reads, House of Hades, I make and glue tiles with the bones of dead journalists, which is a reference to what is referred to as the side tiles from the original tiles.
Thank you.
And we'll talk about these.
Completely forgot about those.
Yeah, we'll talk about these because it's there are a lot of things that take this from being an art project to being legitimate, somebody trying to get their message across the only way they can figure out how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So the House of Hades does tiles like that. It's just like 2 colors, kind of a lot of work, but like not the most work. As opposed to like this is one of the original tiles.
Which
and
is
it's like
multiple
Technicolor,
colors and
beautiful,
tons of tiny lettering.
So much. Really like a lot of work. And you can even see while the House of Hades tries to emulate the way that the handwriting is. I'm going to call it handwriting.
Yeah.
It's still not quite the same.
For me, when I see this text done, because of how consistent it is, I'm surprised that I have never come across a Toynbee font.
Mm-hmm.
To be quite honest, I'm surprised nobody has turned this into a font. Because it is so consistent.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the D's, the A's, the T's, R's. These things are done very precisely each time. I would guess that if I didn't know better, I would say that somebody had a die to stamp these things out with.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Rather than using a knife.
They might have made a stencil set.
Yeah, well, that very well could be it.
Yeah, but actually, that suggests an idea. I think that since this is not copyrighted, nobody owns it. Why don't we invent that font and make some money?
A lot of money.
You guys want to do that?
No.
No, I don't because I've made fonts
of...
before, and trust me, you don't want to do it.
And I don't want to make money off of anything Tanya B related. Tanya B, Toynbee. I just don't. So.
Well, I do.
So I guess like mystery solved, right? It was like one guy just like dropping some tiles in between.
And we don't know who it is. But
who it was, whatever. Okay, just kidding. So Joe, I know this was your question, is what do they mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think taken at face value, it's just like a weird note.
It's a
right?
little bit weird.
Okay, so Toynbee was like this. There were a couple different people that it might have referred to. And 2001: A Space Odyssey, it's just like a Stanley Kubrick film. And like there's nothing really about resurrecting the dead.
No.
On Jupiter. And Jupiter, like what a weird place. It's just a gas planet. It's weird.
So actually, this reminds me of, what is the word for those puzzles where you take a bunch of words and you take the letters of those words and rearrange them
Anagram?
Anagram?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Anagrammatically speaking.
Okay, so this looks to me like an anagram. It looks like somebody has taken some words and rearranged the letters into these sort of meaningless phrases.
So that's really interesting, and that's actually not a theory that I've seen.
I have
heard before. Really?
Yes, I've read stuff that Toynbee can be rearranged into, I think, Teen Boy, and people have gone through and taken everything in it and rearranged it to make different. And there's multiple variances on the messages that don't make any more sense.
Well,
but they can do it.
This is the thing that I want to say. The other thing I want to say about this is that I hesitate to say wrong answers, but there are so many wrong answers out there about the Toynbee tiles. There just are. I mean, people are like, well, it was aliens. No, it wasn't. Well, it's a Soviet conspiracy. Well, maybe it might have been.
Talks about the USSR.
It was just a journalist. Oh, it's just some dude's art project. And there are just so many answers that are really, they feed into the conspiracy theory aspect. They're just crazy talk. I mean, there are so many weird wrong answers, and I would put the kind of anagram theory into, in my mind, a wrong answer, if only because you can only really rearrange one line to make more sense than it makes right now.
That's exactly right. It doesn't make any more sense to be Teen Boy.
Than Toynbee.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it could be though that it's not a word by word thing. So, in other words, the letters that go into Toynbee, which can be rearranged to be Teen Boy, be mixed together with letters from other words in this phrase to get other words.
Sure.
But when they're done, and I think this is one of the things that people grab onto, each line when you see them on the different tiles, sometimes they're very blocked. So 2 words, 3 words, 2 words, 3 words. It's not like a haiku, but it's very organized in that manner. And so it makes one think that, okay, well, if I'm going to rearrange this, then I have to do it a line by line because they're always written the same way. It's never Toynbee idea in. It's Toynbee idea. And, you see where I'm heading with this? They never get interjected into a different line. So then it would be a little strange to say, oh, well, you can mix and match them across the whole thing because it's just distinctly. And when they're done in the colors sometimes are done in blocks. So Toynbee idea, the outside frame of it is one color. In movie 2001 is in another color, so they're very distinctly blocked out. It's very organized and methodical that way. So that's why I don't know that it could be an anagram where you just take all the letters in this and make a whole new statement from anywhere. Take the J from Jupiter and it goes into the first line. That I have a hard time following.
Yeah, I can see that.
Also, we can make sense out of this.
Somewhat.
I mean, a little bit. I think, I actually, as we said, there's documentaries and they decide, well, it's just this. But I think that there's some really strong evidence for this kind of following the same kind of thread. So we'll just kind of jump into it. People generally feel, and I feel that this is true, is that Toynbee refers to Arnold Toynbee, who is a kind of general historian of human existence. One of those historians that don't really exist anymore. He was just like, oh, humans? Yeah, let's talk about all of it.
Well, and
it was a little
12-volume set.
Yeah, and it was really philosophical as well as historic.
Well, and that was the writing of the times.
Totally. So he wrote this book called Experiences, and there's a really long quote from it. Joe, can you read this? Because I think you probably better encapsulate Arnold Toynbee.
Yeah. Plus I know how to read.
That's true. That's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so take it away.
No one has ever been or ever met a living human soul without a body. Someone who accepts, as I myself do, taking it on trust, the present-day scientific account of the universe may find it impossible to believe that a living creature, once dead, can come to life again.
And this is jumping a little bit ahead, but there were these media packets that were circulated that were attributed to the Tyler with this group that he's associated with called the Minority Alliance, which we're not even going to get into.
And this is pre the tiles.
This is pre the tiles, and this is one of those things that if you're really interested in this mystery, you should go out and research this. But I just don't think there's value in us sitting here and talking about it for like an hour.
There's so much information.
There's so much.
I think what you're getting at is we're trying to give kind of the surface overview.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this would be a 4-hour episode.
More than
because we can dive in, as you said, down the rabbit hole, and we'll go down that and have to come back out and go down the next. I had to stop reading on this one. So I understand.
So, anyways, there's a early account of the pre-tile formation of this kind of Toynbee idea situation attributed to this group called the Minority Association. We'll maybe get a little bit into that a little bit later, but for now, just believe me. That is the thing. And they circulated these kind of media packets, which were only able to be tracked down from one person. But they had this quote. It had a more expansive version of this quote in it. So, okay, so pause on that idea for a second. Next idea, 2001, in movie 2001, right? So at the end of that movie, you guys remember it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, this movie, I did not get this movie.
Yeah.
We talked about it when I'd watched it for the first time ever because I just recently watched it. I don't get that movie.
So at the end, the protagonist sees himself dying, and then suddenly he's dying, and then there's this light, and he's like a fetus in an embryo again, like a baby, and he floats off into space, and it's super weird. A lot of people,
space baby.
Yeah, people kind of refer to this as a proto-religious ending to a movie or a proto-religious experience of watching this movie, for instance.
Well, I never really got that whole baby thing, if that was him or if that was just representing the rebirth of the human race.
Totally.
I've heard that it's a metaphor of, he was found by aliens when he went through the wormhole, for lack of a better term, and then they didn't know what to do with him, and then when they died, they figured out how to bring him back, and they figured out how to get him back where he'd come from, so then they were taking him back to Earth, and it's like, what?
So,
how did you draw that conclusion?
Right.
Yeah,
my understanding of the whole thing, and because I read the book as well as saw the movie, and that didn't make the whole baby in the sky thing any more comprehensible to me. But yeah, he goes through a
great band name.
Yeah, Baby in the Sky.
Baby in the Sky.
But yeah, he does go through some wormholes, and he winds up in this place of aliens who he never sees. By the way, they've actually built a room for him, or actually a series of rooms, like a nice little apartment for him. And nothing actually works as advertised, like the doors don't open, the drawers don't open, stuff like that. But it looks just like a normal, nice quality apartment or something like that. And apparently, he lives out the rest of his days there in captivity with the aliens.
Okay.
Yeah, and so.
So so let's just trust some people on an interpretation of the end of this movie.
Okay.
Because I think we all can kind of agree
that's all I can do.
that I can watch that a million times and still be like, I have no idea what
I don't know what this means. Yeah.
So there are some kind of, especially taken in context with the Toynbee tiles and the Toynbee kind of philosophies sort of situations. So if you merge these two things together and add a little bit of Christian flavor of our own, which is definitely referred to in the manifesto and often the side tiles kind of heaven idea, we can kind of think of what happened at the end of 2001 as being human and science, or maybe alien and science, resurrection or reanimation of human molecules as whole humans in space, therefore creating heaven in space, fulfilling God's quote unquote promise to resurrect dead people after
heaven.
In heaven, right? So
heaven
that we
is
would
truly
do that,
up, which is in space.
So we would do that through. We would fulfill His promise as humans through science, which He gave us. Okay, these are all this is the train of thought we're following. Through that train of thought, the Toynbee resurrection, once dead, can come alive again. A human without a soul, without a body. 2001, Kubrick kind of saying, oh, well, obviously we're going to resurrect ourselves in space. In Jupiter, which is where they went, it was Project Jupiter in 2001. So maybe the movie is about humans being resurrected in Jupiter, which is, if you just according to some documents that have been procured, if you would just, put an oxygen bomb on Jupiter, it would turn into a totally human, hospitable environment.
Yeah, right. Good luck with that.
So there's
easy terraforming.
Yeah, no, obviously that's a problem, but that Jupiter would become heaven in space, and we would be able to resurrect our dead there, and that would be heaven.
It's a heck of a sauna.
Yeah.
It would be. I don't know. I don't remember what the gravity is on Jupiter, but it's staggeringly higher than ours is.
Sure. The theory is that
the visibility is terrible.
It's awful. Yeah. But I did think it was interesting to think about, and this is something that's been discovered since this whole Toynbee 2001 everything, is that it turns out that one of Jupiter's moons may actually be a fairly viable terraforming place. I could be misremembering this, but it's almost an ice planet, and they think that there's actually surface underneath there, so it's got a lot of water on it.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a surface, so if we could just dry it out a little bit.
I don't think it's never going to be habitable with an atmosphere. I mean, the only planet really we have any chance of terraforming could be Mars.
It's Europa.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's Europa because it's covered in ice. They can tell that there's they believe that there's some kind of either tectonic or tidal forces being exerted on the planet because of the way that the ice moves and cracks and breaks, and they believe that it's liquid underneath it. So it's not so much a terraforming as it's plausible to actually have life on it that's in the fluid or water underneath this ice.
And plus, the other thing of note and interest about it is it might make a really nice little resource. I mean, if you have space colonies out there and it's full of water, methane, whatever, those are highly useful things.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
so, yeah, totally. So I guess that was my own little interesting tidbit that okay, Jupiter probably not but something really close to Jupiter maybe, probably not again, but who knows? It's only been 40 years since 50 years since 2001 came out.
It
came out in
45 years. Yeah, it's 45. Yeah. Wow. That's been a long time.
And in that amount of time, we've done incredible things. So who's to say, another 45 years, another be oh no, it's obviously we were going to colonize Europa, duh. Or, it was Mars all along. Who knows? Who knows? So we're good with kind of what it might mean, right? I mean, I guess
I'm not good with it, but I can understand.
Is there better theory?
No, I don't have a theory. Okay. I think that the theories are kind of far-fetched, at least from my perspective.
Okay.
But the message is so vague that the far-fetched idea is the closest to being plausible. So when I say I'm not okay with it, it's just because it doesn't make sense to me. The whole thing still is just really, really odd to me.
It really, you're right. It does make no sense. I mean, this message makes no sense unless it's some sort of a code.
Yeah. So I guess I think that this interpretation, when you can kind of take it in with this overarching idea of who may have done them and
in the
how
context.
He might have felt. Yeah, I guess in the context makes some sense. There's these side tiles that crop up. So you see these pictures. It's like a license plate sized tile that has the 4 lines, the Tonyubi idea in 2001 Space, or not 2001 Space Odyssey, in Kubrick's or movie 2001 Resurrected on Planet Jupiter. And then there are these little side messages, and they are often, I think, more interesting than...
They're more informative because the main tile is just repetitive.
It's super repetitive. So so here's a picture of one of the original ones, and we can see if we can see the... What are you doing?
Kind of looking at it from different angles. That's why I'm turning my head like this. Because I'm just trying to see if there's perhaps something that we're missing.
See,
maybe it's a drawing.
This is exactly what I was saying. Because you feel it's one of those mysteries where you feel like the answer is on the tip of your brain, right? It's there's an obvious answer here that we are just too dumb to see. Don't you feel that way right now?
Do you remember in the 90s when those images were everybody was selling, and it was just a super fine print of some repetitive pattern, and you were supposed to stare at it for about 5 minutes, and suddenly the real image would pop forward because you could see it because of the way it was.
It's a schooner.
I think that's where Joe might be heading here. I squinted at him.
That's what I was thinking.
I took my glasses off. I still can't figure it out.
Yeah. No,
I don't see the schooner.
But this phenomena is exactly what I'm talking about. When you start to get into this, you just keep thinking, well, there's got to be something that somebody missed, or we're just overlooking the obvious answer. And there's just not.
Yeah, there isn't. I mean, I suppose what you could say is that if you look at the white outline part, it almost looks like it's sort of a crude drawing of a ziggurat. And I don't know if you've heard the story, of course, about the Tower of Babel, which really wasn't a tower at all. It was a ziggurat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
a ziggurat is
like a sort of like flattened pyramid sort of building.
Okay, just making
that
sure
was
I was
popular
on.
in ancient civilizations in the Middle East. The Tower of Babel was basically about the collapse of a civilization. And one of Toynbee's recurring themes was he spent a lot of time thinking about and writing about how civilizations collapse and why civilizations perish. Why they flourish for a while and then eventually they crumble and they go away. Okay, it's a long shot, I know.
It's got as much validity as anything else that we've come across here so far. So I'm willing to back it.
Yeah, it's a message about Babel. Can you understand the message? No.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not.
That's why we're going to crumble.
Crumble and fall.
Yeah.
So, okay, side texts is where we were starting.
Let's go back to the side text.
Right.
Yeah, we were talking about
Yeah.
that before I got off on my little tangent there. Sorry about that.
Texts, again, they're pretty interesting. And a lot of the old original tiles, the old style tiles, are pretty destroyed at this point. I mean, linoleum isn't the most durable of substances.
Yeah.
And when they're in the middle of the street, and when cities are like really actively trying to cover them up.
Well, let's even talk about, I mean, you see some of the photos, and you can tell that the main exterior piece of linoleum has worn or been pulled away, and all that's left are the letters, and then they start moving on that tar substrate, and suddenly it looks like alphabet soup.
Totally.
Because they're all just jammed together, and it's unreadable. So, yeah, these things, I'm guessing, what do they have, a 2-year, 3-year life shelf?
Well,
at the best?
So I guess that's kind of part of it, is that there are some that are in like Philadelphia, that have been around since the 80s.
Yeah, it probably depends on the amount of traffic they get.
They're not. Philadelphia isn't actively trying to pave over them, and Philadelphia is one of those places where they don't pave a lot.
I was going to say, they don't really have money for the infrastructure.
They don't really have that. So, and Philadelphia is the epicenter of these. It is, I think, accepted at this point. I would say pretty much everybody agrees that the Tyler lived in Philadelphia.
Probably. Seems right.
Yeah, I can back that.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about this.
Isn't Bruce Willis from Philadelphia? Yeah, I think we solved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So, okay, so
the Die Hard Tyler.
No.
Tile Hard. Yeah.
So there are these little side guys. So, like, one of them says, and this is like a really destroyed tile, but somehow the sidebar has stuck around more than the tile. This one says, I'm only one man. When I got a fatal disease, they gloated in joy over its death.
Over its death?
Yeah. So another one says, you must make and glue tiles. You, as media is, and there's like a missing chunk. And then it says, you must make and glue tile. You must, as media, USSA. And then another one, which I think is really interesting, it says, I am only one man, and when I caught a fatal disease, they gloated over its death. That's when it's broken up. I think it's begged them not to destroy thank you and something.
Because it's partially,
just like that
it's
part
gone.
of it's just like come off. These side tiles are just really, really interesting.
Well, it seems like the side tiles are where the personality of the tiler actually comes through.
Yeah, it's rather a paranoid personality.
So, yeah. So the side tiles, and then particularly what they call the manifesto tile, are what, for me, makes this a real thing. Because I think it's very easy to look at these tiles and say, oh, this was someone's art project. Right? It was the early 80s to, like, early aughts. This is a time when a lot of people are doing experimental surrealist art. All right, so it's just somebody who's like got an art project going on. They've got some kind of nonsense phrase that they're just regurgitating over and over again.
We'll say that they're putting down knowing the people are going to puzzle over for years.
Yeah. So the manifesto, you guys have both seen that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a set of 4 linoleum tiles, and it has hundreds of words on it. And I have a transcript of what it says, but it's really paranoid. And I think it's worth hearing. So, Steve?
Yeah, I can run this.
Yeah.
Not that I'm the paranoid of the group.
Well, you might be, though.
No,
of
I'm
the
not.
three
I'm
of
not.
us?
Stop looking. No, I'm not really. I'm not.
Yeah. What's that supposed to mean?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do this. So, John Knight, owner of the Philadelphia Inquirer, hellion Jew, who's hated this movement's guts for years, takes money from the mafia to make the mafia look good in his newspapers, so he has the mafia in his back pocket. John Knight sent the mafia to murder me in May 1991. There's an unreadable bit. Journalists, all of them, gloated in my face about my death, and Knight, Ritter's great power to destroy. In fact, John Knight went into hellion binge of joy over Knight Ritter's great power to destroy. I secured house with blast doors and fled the country in June 1991. NBC attorneys, journalists, and security officials at Rockefeller Center fraudulently, something's disappeared, under the Freedom of Information Act, all orders of NBC executives got the U.S. Federal District Attorney's office, and I got the FBI to get Interpol to establish task force that located me in Dover, England. When back home, Inquirer got union goons from their own employer union to send down a sports journalist who, with baseball bat, bashed in lights and windows of neighborhood cars, as well as men outside my house. They stationed there still, waiting for me. NBC, CBS, Group W, Westinghouse, Time Warner, Fox, Universal. All of the cult of the Hellion. Each were much worse than Knight Ritter ever was. Mostly Hellion Jews. When KYW and NBC executives told John Knight, the whole coven gloated on how their Soviet pals had found a way to turn it into a...
And this
that's
a little bit paranoid.
That's a screed. That's not a manifesto to me. That's a screed. But that's definitely paranoid.
So when did that appear?
It was discovered in 1997, and I think it looked like it was a little aged.
So it had been about, let's just say, 12 to 15 years before from the originals to when this happened.
Oh, yeah.
I'm encapsulating start to when that one happened.
Yeah, totally. Yes. So, and like we're talking how the handwriting looks really, really like the handwriting is really consistent throughout all of the original like old style ones. Mm-hmm. And the handwriting in this is also super consistent. But this is not this is not something that somebody writes and then reads and is like, yeah, that reads well. This is something that somebody like scribbles out. This
carves and writes as they go.
Was carving as they went, totally. And the handwriting's still like really consistent.
Yeah.
And it's so paranoid.
And this is on, when I looked at it in the pictures, it looks like it's 4 1-foot square tiles. Would that be pretty close to accurate?
Yeah, so they're like a standard like a linoleum tile size.
Yeah, 8 by 8 or 12 by 12, something like that. Mm-hmm. So I mean, all of that text is in a 16 by 16 or 24 by 24 inch square area.
And it's actually, it turns out, legible.
Yeah. Totally legible.
And this is where? Philadelphia?
Yeah. So the other really interesting thing about this whole situation is that in 1983, there was a small little article published in the Philadelphia Inquirer about the ideas of the Minority Association and the Toynbee idea to resurrect dead on Jupiter.
The Toynbee idea to resurrect dead?
Yeah. So this whole, like the idea, right? Toynbee idea... Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey. This has been propagated ostensibly for a while before. And there was an article written in the Inquirer that was referenced a Philadelphia-based campaign to resurrect dead on Jupiter that didn't reference the tiles, but it may have been pre-tiles. And all of the ideas that were spoken about in this article in the Inquirer, which they referenced in the manifesto tiles pretty frequently, are there.
That's odd.
So
I don't know how else to say that, but that's odd.
So the article talked about this idea to resurrect the dead, but it didn't actually mention or reference the tiles.
Okay, so the article again, it's this like this little tidbit of prehistory, and the only place I've ever heard of it is in this documentary and in this group that did this research for this documentary, in the like prehistory of the tiles in the Minority Association.
Yeah, they dove pretty far into that.
They went deep down the rabbit hole. Again, I will direct you to said documentary if you're really interested in this. Beware that your life will be sucked in.
You'll die broke and penniless, but
you may. But they found this article in the Inquirer, and I think it was titled "You Want to Run That By Me Again?" And,
yes.
It had this not interview, but it had this information from a guy who had written in he claimed to be from the Minority Association. And he said his name was Joe Morosco. James Morosco, I'm sorry. And he was part of this group called the Minority Association, and they were working on a campaign to resurrect dead people on planet Jupiter. And it was like a 4-paragraph long, maybe at the most, article.
Yeah, it wasn't real big.
But the fact that the manifesto, like, kind of schizoid, like, ramblings of a crazy person talk about the Inquirer that much is very interesting to me because, as far as I understand it, that wasn't made public. Like, they didn't make the archives public until early 2000s. And I could be wrong about that, but that's just as far as I know. So that's interesting to me. That's an interesting little, like, pin. I don't have a good answer. I don't have a good reason.
Yeah.
Except that they may be the same person.
Yeah. I don't know. That one's I know that in the documentary that is a giant leap for them.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I'm willing
I'm
to
not.
make the leap.
I'm not so convinced. But that's just because this thing is so fragmented.
Yeah, it is really fragmented.
And when you try to make sense out of something like this, you have to accept the fact also that it sounds like whoever created these things was probably mentally imbalanced. So trying to make sense out of insanity can really kind of drive you insane.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, and the other dangerous part about, and I know all three of us have fallen in this when researching something, is we see, let's say, a hint of a name, and I'm simplifying this greatly, but we get a name in our head of how it should be spelled, and so we are madly researching that spelling of that name, not taking into consideration that Morosco could be spelled differently.
Yeah.
Because in the movie they make a point. There's one guy named James Morosco in the area that they can find, and he's nowhere near where he's supposed to be.
Him, definitely.
But then you go and you think, well, they keep spelling it one way. Well, I can think of, when I looked at the name, about 3 or 4 different ways that I could perceive that being spelled. So then what happens? Well, then it branches out and it gets even harder.
Yeah, particularly if it was like a phone interview.
Yeah.
And I don't know that was ever specified. And again, this is this kind of like pre-tile situation that I really don't think we should go too far into.
I think we're already going there.
We have been a little bit. So I guess the only place that this leaves us is to talk about who may have done this, right? Who this person might be.
According to that.
According to that manifesto, maybe. So I guess there are 3 kind of good suspects that they talk about. And they talk about this in the documentary, but they also, like, just it's widely accepted that these are kind of the 3 main people. One is called Railroad Joe. One is James Morosco. And one is a man by the name of Sevi Verna.
Okay. And
so
why should we believe that any of these guys did it?
Well, we'll get into that in, like, literally right now.
Okay.
Perfect. All right. Railroad Joe. Okay. I guess I should preface this all by saying there was a tile found in South America. And it was the first and only accepted original or old style tile to have been found outside of the U.S. Okay? And it had a P.O. box and a street address in Philadelphia.
Which then everybody is latched on to.
Yes.
To find their point of origin.
Because, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, okay, yes, we're dealing with potentially a mentally unhinged person, but why would somebody write down just like a random street address in Philadelphia and leave it in South America attached to this idea unless they wanted people to pay attention to that street address?
Well, but
unless they want to harass the person.
I was about to say, unless they consider the person that's there to be an enemy of some kind, and then this is a great way to get revenge.
That's true.
Although traveling all the way to South America, traveling all the way to South America to do that, that's a little weird.
It's a little weird.
Yeah, well, but I mean, stranger things have happened.
Oh yeah.
But I'm just saying, and again, this is one of those things. Okay, but we're always looking at it as at face value. This is truthful in terms of I put this down so you'll find me instead of subterfuge. I'm going to put this down so you don't find me, but now you're going to bug the heck out of this guy who has been my mortal enemy.
So, yes. My counter to that is that if you walk in within like a 3-block radius of this place, you find these little trial runs of the tiles. They're just little like bits of linoleum or kind of like nonsense, just letter engravings that are embedded in the asphalt. They're tiny. They're little scraps. They're cast-offs. But within a 3-block radius of this one apartment. And yes, of course, That's
the greatest form of misdirection, is to name the suspect and then start dropping clues around or evidence around that suspect.
That's true.
I'm not buying into that, but I'm going to take the skeptic standpoint on this and say, if I'm going to run with the I did this to get that guy, I'm going to do, well, you know what? It's really easy. Once a month, I go to his neighborhood and just drop some of my scrap garbage that I've been making these with and just walk away.
Yeah.
And look at, they're all knocking on his door.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's totally true. I think that's a great point to bring up because I think that's a point that's not brought up enough. However, since I'm presenting this mystery, I have to take the totally believer standpoint.
Sucks to be you.
Okay, so there's been a lot of research done in this area, and as far as anybody can remember, there's only been 2 people who ever lived in at this address. One was Railroad Joe. That's what they call him. I don't remember his whole name. I don't think it's super important.
That was what everybody called him.
Everybody calls him Railroad Joe because he worked on a railroad.
Yeah.
It's a tongue twister for me. I'm sorry. On Conrail.
Conrail, yeah.
So one of the things they talk about with this guy is that they do some familial research on him, and his family were gravestone engravers.
Oh.
So that's a pretty easy leap to make, right?
Yeah.
You know, somebody
you'd learn how to make consistent handwriting
and totally be a quick carver. Right? It's not like this would be taking you days to do because you might be great at it. It might just take you an hour or 2 or maybe less. Also, Conrail, at the time that this man was working for Conrail, their railway lines perfectly mirrored the spread of where the original tiles have all been found. So all of the major
cities... South America.
Okay, but wait. No, that's not true, actually.
Oh, okay.
So it only goes as far south as Conrail went. It only goes as far west as Conrail went, and it stops in every single major city, it's a major city. Same time that he was working for this rail system, there's an article to prove this that names him by name as the railway foreman for Conrail. Conrail was shipping a telescope that was made in Philadelphia to South America where they found that one tile.
Really? So Conrail was shipping it?
Conrail was apparently
they were building
working
it.
With.
Yeah, I don't remember if they were building it or if they were involved in the shipping.
Somehow they were involved because there was an article that was written about the shipping of this telescope and that this guy was named, Railroad Joe was named by first and last name as being the railway foreman for this project.
Oh, really?
So that's an interesting
That's kind of intriguing. Yeah.
The only thing about this is that Railroad Joe, died in 1987.
Okay, there's a problem.
Yeah, so
that's a big problem.
When did the Chile one appear?
It was in the early 80s. He would have been alive.
Oh, okay.
But tiles have been dated to much later than that.
Mm-hmm. Well, copy
in the correct style.
In the correct style, it would have been the original ones. So he would have had to been laying them past the grave, which doesn't seem super likely.
Well, it does say resurrect dead in his message.
That's true. Maybe he was successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's doing it from Jupiter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's been traveling from Jupiter.
Oh, God.
Commuting, if you will. So James Maresco, next one, right?
Who's named in the
He's named in
article.
the Inquirer article. He's also... Okay, so I guess we do have to delve a little bit into this back history of the Minority Association. And there was this press packet that went out, and there were these wheat paste posters that went up in the early 80s.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but a wheat paste poster is literally you slap paste when you're in grade school. Paste it's some version of that onto a poster and then just slap it against the wall to adhere it rather than using a stapler or tape or something like that. Yeah. That's what a wheat paste poster is?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure I was
Those are the ones that like stick up for years and years.
Yeah, you cannot because they're sealed and got it. Just making sure I understood that.
And where did these appear?
In Philadelphia, in kind of like lower income hubs, so like Greyhound stations, Union Station, things like that. And they had the same messaging that the tiles do. And that's about as far as I'm willing really to go into.
It wasn't the same verbiage, but the same idea?
It was the same idea.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Minority Association is fairly widely accepted to be the predecessor to these tiles. And on all of the media information, they had this like press packet that we talked about a little bit earlier. The name that appears is James Maresco. He's a good candidate.
So he was their spokesman.
He was their publicity manager, essentially. But, as we were
wasn't
just talking
just the
about...
president, he was a client, too.
He probably served as, in every slot.
He actually didn't.
Because he probably was the entire organization.
Here's the thing, is that actually he didn't. It was him and his brother and his brother's wife. And
girlfriend or something?
Like one other person. And there's actually apparently some kind of signed documentation of this, that there were more than just him involved. Anyways, so there's been some searches on this name based on any information that could be gained from the journalist that wrote this article. And there was one guy named James Maresco who would have been in his 70s. He's the one you read about when you just do like a prolific Google search on Toynbee tiles. They say
because he's the one that comes up.
That's the one that they say, but he would have been in his 70s or 80s when the tiles were being laid. But we think he's the best candidate. It's because he shares
his name
the name
matches. Again, this is where I say spelling.
Right. Alternately, the theory was floated, and I think this is probably the strongest theory, is that it was a pseudonym.
Yeah.
And that it was actually the guy who lived at the address after Railroad Joe died, named Sevi Verna, who has been discounted because his mother says he has a lung disease, therefore he's never been able to travel.
And he's a bit of a shut-in.
He's a super shut-in. Nobody really ever sees him.
Could make it plausible that he is, or completely plausible that he isn't.
He was attacked in 1996 in his home.
He was attacked over this?
He was attacked, not over this. It was over a different dispute.
Some kind of neighbor dispute, if I remember.
But because of that, it has been documented by his neighbors that he put up plywood in his windows and barred his door, just like that manifesto says. The person did. He's really, really smart, apparently, and totally a shut-in and kind of crazy. He apparently drove a car that was missing a floorboard.
Oh, really?
And also had this giant antenna that broadcasted like a kind of pirate radio TV shortwave thing. And again, that's something that like I don't even want to touch. But
the shortwave connection. If you're super interested, go look it up. That's so far down the road. Yeah, that's another 30 minutes of discussion right there.
At least, yeah. Additionally, in these papers that were uncovered of this original kind of minority association situation, all of the references to themselves refer to James Maresco, with one exception that appears to be a typo, which refers to themselves as Severino Virna.
So he messed up and broke characters.
Maybe.
That's what that infers.
Yeah. So it seems to be a fairly strong connection to this guy who lives in the place where the tile referred people. He's kind of crazy. He's kind of a shut-in. And the neighbors kind of describe him as this without, it seems, knowing anything about the situation. You know, these are people you say, hey, can you tell me a little about this guy? They say, oh, yeah, he's really, really smart. He's kind of shut-in. He's really shy. He's very scared. Oh, and he drove this car that, like, I think, like, the bottom rusted out. Like, just to kind of tell people how eccentric this guy was. without having knowledge of the fact that people think that he's the Tyler. And again, this is hard to verify.
In this,
right?
Okay, you and I talked about this before we started recording tonight. Yeah. Is that this is one of those A plus F draws conclusion of C kind of scenarios to me, which is not always the right way to approach it, but it's the easy thing to see and go to. The example that you and I talked about is in the documentary. They talk about where some of the text could come from, and there was that play. Or was it a play?
Yeah, David Mamet.
Yeah, 4 a.m. is the name of it. It's a play. It's a 2-man play about somebody calling into a radio DJ and spouting all these crazy ideas, which are very in line with some of the stuff.
Some of it is like word for word.
Yeah, it's very, very close. Okay, well, I'm gonna make a jump in the same kind of logical conclusion.
Well, okay, and I guess we should add caveat to that is that David Mamet believes that these tiles are an homage to his play. So let's just throw that out there.
Yeah. But I'm just trying to get across this. Why totally. People jump to say it's Sevi is this basic. I'm following this train, and it just seems so easy. Okay, well, when I was watching the documentary, one of the guys in it, I can't remember who it was. Justin,
protagonist.
He finds a freshly laid tile that has been on the ground for minutes because he peels it apart, he discovers it, and he says, I went to the store, and it must have been about 4 a.m. in the morning, and then I found this. Okay, well, I can run this logic that says, well, they're following they're now incorporating the play, which is called 4 a.m., which is supposed to be the time that this call was made in this call-in show. And whoever's doing this is now, as an homage, following that and dropping these things at 4 a.m.
Yeah. And now this guy...
Okay, well, let's just follow... Okay, you could see the logic in that, and that could build steam and get built upon. But it's a connection that is very, very loose, and I think that it's only by the pounding of feet on top of it that it gets so strong. And so that's my thing when everybody says it's Sevi.
Yeah.
I actually feel bad for Sevi.
Well, and so here's my thing about Sevi is his mother says that he has this lung disease, and the tiles very clearly refer to this man having a terminal disease of some kind and struggling with the idea of death. And I think that the man that you've described as this kind of manic, reclusive, really smart, but kind of scared man who may have some kind of mental thing, who's also struggling with a terminal illness, I just feel like he really fits the image that you have of the kind of person that would make these tiles.
Sort of, yeah.
But, again, my problem is you've built that image based
totally built that image,
and it's almost too conveniently molded. That's my problem.
That's totally fair.
Is that it almost seems too easy.
Absolutely.
So let me interrupt for a second. So this guy is how old now? Is he still alive?
Yeah, he's I think in his. He would have been in his early 20s when these things first started, kind of.
Which was the 80s.
Yeah.
Late mid 70s is when all the stuff happened.
Yeah,
so if he's in his 20s, he's in his 70s now.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he moved in after Railroad Joe.
After 87, yeah.
After Railroad Joe, he moved in then.
Died,
yeah.
Or maybe earlier. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't seen the record. It may be that Railroad Joe moved out to live in a facility while he died or something. But in the Railroad Joe was remembered early 80s at the very least.
Yeah. So interesting. Yeah, I wonder if Railroad Joe maybe laid some of the original ones down for the sheer fun of it, and then moved out and left some of his materials behind.
Yeah, maybe it was just a continuation. And that was a thought that came to me as well, is that how convenient that these two people who the stories totally kind of a little bit fit. Maybe they knew each other. Maybe how did he find this place? Were they friends? Did they
We can say that maybe they were both. Is the Minority Association? Is that the name of it?
Maybe they were
both in it, and Joe started it and created the template, and then somebody else picked it up, whether it was Sevi or somebody else, if he creates a template, then you just start following the template. And if you follow a template after enough time, you don't need the template
anymore.
You can do it freehand after years of doing this kind of thing. And then when they start doing the little side tiles or the manifesto, you just automatically carve in that manner, because I'm holding this, let's just say it's a box knife, because that's what I would carve linoleum with. Okay, it's a box knife. I hold the box knife and I cut this way every time, and then just bing, bang, boom, you just automatically, muscle memory kicks in.
Yeah. So I guess for me, I have this picture, and I've always had this picture of this person who feels like they've discovered the answer to eternal human life, right? And whether that's a legitimate discovery or not,
but the rest of us are just too dumb to catch on.
Totally. And it goes back to that
Which
feeling.
Would be frustrating.
It's kind of just this overarching feeling of like frustration with this case, either on any side of it, even if it's the person of the Tyler, right? I feel that there's this like feeling of frustration, because one of the side tiles says, "Kill all journalists, I beg you." And there's a fairly well-documented history of somebody kind of in the early 80s trying to reach out to journalists to give this idea to them, to the media, to the main media at large.
The mainstream media.
So I get this image of this person who, for whatever reason, is really uncomfortable with the idea of death. Like, more uncomfortable than the normal human being, right? And
I'm pretty uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, that's fair. Some people are, some people aren't. And you get this idea in your head, and you think, oh my God, I figured it out. I know, like, obviously, Kubrick was trying to tell us this. Toynbee was trying to tell us this. The answer to this is we just resurrect the dead. Like, this is something that people have known about. Conspiracy theorists get these things in their head. They think
it's a moment of clarity.
People have known this forever, but it's being kept from the general population for whatever reason. And maybe it didn't start out that way. Maybe it starts out with, oh my God, this is what this person's trying to tell us. And you reach out to the media and you say, hey, this is what this person is trying to tell us. And the media says, okay, you're a crackpot. And you face this ridicule and this like taunting. And since you're maybe a little crazy already, it starts to cycle on itself. You reach out and you say, hey, this idea. And they say, ha, 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 that idea. And you say, oh, they hate me. Oh, and you vilify them. And you hate them more.
I don't even think that's saying that they're crazy or imbalanced, but if you're constantly being rejected, it's rejection is what it is. You're being rejected on this idea. That will push you to either stop or go to greater and greater extremes to get your message across.
Well, I think you become reactive.
Yeah,
and you vilify the people who are
perfect answer.
But he didn't
saying no to you. So you come up with this other method, and your other method happens to be these tiles, and you start laying these tiles over and over again because you feel like this is the only way you can get out. And then suddenly, because you're so reactive and so closeted, people start coming to you and saying, "Hey, we think you're doing this," and you go, "No, I'm not doing that. Stay away from me because if I tell you I'm doing that, you're going to make fun of me."
Well, plus it's kind of illegal. You could be fined.
Sure, but I think that there are some people who have approached him in this very, really honest way, and if it's that person or not, it doesn't matter. But to like react that strongly, of no reaction. Just a complete, shutdown.
Just shoves him back.
And
never answers the door, pushes you away. Yeah, I can see that.
And to have not done anything for the last, 15 years at this point, right? It was 2002 was the last
10.
Really
10, 12 years.
Yeah.
And that could be all of the attention. It could be that the person that's really doing it has died.
Yeah.
It could be, if we're going to run down it, Sevi, it might be that he's so afraid to do it anymore, or maybe he's disillusioned because of the copycat. I mean, again, there is 1,000. It's like
there's so many
roots on a plant. You can go in a million different directions.
It's all speculation, but the thing about it is like, if he's got some sort of message for the world about his ideas for resurrecting the dead, then he could have picked a better format than vinyl on the street, because and unintelligible messages. I mean, if he really has something to tell us about this, then he could write a book. He could write letters to the editor. and write something that's coherent.
Oh, wait,
and that actually
wait.
makes a certain
I can't believe I'm going to do this, but I'm going to step up and defend Sevi a little bit on this. Okay.
Or
whoever it is.
Well, maybe he's just insane.
I can't write a book because nobody will publish it, and I don't have the money to self-publish.
Yeah.
I can write letters to the editor till I'm blue in the face, but that doesn't mean that they're going to publish them because they get a gazillion every day.
Okay, and let's go a step further from that, right? Okay, so if we're going to go with the David Mamet play connection a little bit, right? Because it is a little uncanny. You start to read
it really is
the David Mamet stuff and read everything you can about the Toynbee tiles, and it's like some of it is like phrase for phrase. Okay, so David Mamet said, "Oh no, there was no caller. This like totally came up. I think actually these tiles are a reference to my play." But very early, like right after he published the play, he said, "Yeah, I heard an interview on Larry King Live at like 4:00 in the morning, and that's where I got this idea." So Sevi, or whoever it is, right, calls Larry King Live and gets this phone interview, and then there's like nothing done about it. So he like writes to some dude at the Inquirer, and there's like a little like super skeptical kind of making fun of him thing, and he like writes other letters to the editor. People are just like saying no. Dismiss. So he does these the wheat paste stuff, right? But that's coming down. That's not permanent enough for him. Well, what else can I do? Oh, well, I'll put these tiles in. It's more permanent. It's a way that he knows how to get his message across a little bit, and it probably, to the person who writes that, makes total sense. Let's be totally honest here.
I agree with that. Whoever's writing this message, those 4 lines
that makes total
clear.
sense.
Yeah, to you, not to the rest of us.
But they don't.
Have you considered another possibility, which is that the guy wasn't insane? He just really hated pedestrians. And this is a really great way to get people run over because they're going to stop and look at this and scratch their head and not even notice that bus coming towards them.
So the old ones, the old style ones are like. There was one in the entrance to like a turnpike
Holland
tunnel.
Yeah, Holland Tunnel.
The Holland Tunnel. And then like another one in the middle of a different freeway. And they're like in the middle of streets and stuff like that.
They're not just on pedestrian ways.
And the new style ones are almost 100% geared towards pedestrians. They're in the middle of the street, but they're like turned so that a pedestrian on the sidewalk could see it. Instead of being geared towards like the traffic going down the street, they're turned horizontally so that the pedestrians can read it from the sidewalk, or they're in the middle of a crosswalk, or they're on a sidewalk.
You know, one of the things that mystifies me about the one over on Hawthorne is they picked probably one of the least pedestrian intensive stretches of the street.
Yeah, there's one on MLK on like one of the least pedestrian intense spaces too, and that's the other kind of question mark about this is that like, okay, so you're doing these tiles in the middle of a freeway, like who the hell's gonna see that? Like you might drive over it and be like, oh, there was something there, but you can't read those 4 lines while driving over it, you know? And it's not geared towards that. It's not written the opposite, the way that they do signs like, you know, in the middle of the street.
Could have been an accident. Could have dropped it by accident.
That was a couple of accidents, though. Don't you think?
Okay, so let's run with the guy's got a hole in the floorboard of his car, and he's got a stack of these things prepped.
Yeah, and he takes a corner a little too fast. And
he's driving down the road, and he runs over a raccoon, and the car goes foom foom, and the top one off the stack slides off, and there's no way he's gonna stop to grab it. Oh, that one's done. It's gone. Oh well.
I would just say that that happened to be a very lucky landing because it looks really intentional.
Yeah. And
it's not like in a weird little...
Who knows?
It is a lucky landing, and odds are, of course, that it would about 50-50 that would have landed upside down, and it would have been reverse lettering.
I feel like we're missing something obvious here.
Yeah, very.
Don't you? Right now, I just feel like the answer is like literally on the tip of my brain.
I feel like I'm missing all of it.
Yeah.
I think a little more.
I mean, I still don't understand what this is about.
Yeah.
A couple more beers, a little more scotch.
Weird. This whole thing is just goofy.
Yeah. So...
Not to sound like I'm dismissing it or being a jerk. In my head, it's goofy. I don't get it.
And this is one, there have not been any listener suggestions for it, but it has been, like, literally since we started talking about doing this show, you know, years ago. this has been one that I've been thinking, oh, I got to do that. And I was just saying to Steve, like literally an hour before we recorded, I was like, I'm not ready. I can't do it. And I think that's just kind of how it's always going to be.
With this story, yeah.
With this story. So I guess if you want to check out the or any of the links, we'll link the documentary that we've been talking about all night.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can find all that stuff at our website, which is thinkingsidewayspodcast.com. If you come up with a really brilliant theory of some kind, please email us. Like, seriously, please email us. It's thinkingsidewayspodcast@gmail.com.
And by the way, if you are the tiler, would you just as a little present do some of those tiles, a whole bunch of them with Thinking Sideways, and put them on the streets? We'd really appreciate it.
Would you? That would be great.
That'd be an awesome marketing campaign.
Awesome. You can always leave us a comment on our website if you're listening there. A lot of people are trying to get in touch with us that way. We try to get back to you, in a fairly timely manner. If you're not listening on our website, you're probably listening on iTunes. If you are, leave us a comment and a rating so that other people can listen to us and find us. Find us on Facebook. You can stream us on Stitcher if you forget to download us on any mobile-ready device. Yeah. So I guess Is
that it?
I think so.
Okay.
I think that's my feeling, right? Like, I can't verbalize it any better than that. But
all right.
So yeah.
I'm tired of this story anyway.
Oh.
Yeah. Try.
No, this just doesn't deserve
wrong.
it.
You're right.
You think it
so
might be
Sorry, Tyler.
You think it's David Mamet?
Oh.
Yeah.
That would be a hell of a publicity stunt.
Thinking Sideways.
I don't understand.
Does not compute.
You never know.
Insufficient data to formulate a reply.
What?
Stories of things we simply don't know the answer to.
Hey, everyone. This is Thinking Sideways, the podcast. I'm Devin, joined, as always, by...
Joe.
And Steve. It's my new name.
Hey,
Steve.
guys. Happy birthday.
Huh?
What?
It's our birthday today. We're a year old today.
Not quite.
Yeah. It's been 52. Isn't this our 52nd episode in 52 weeks?
52 weeks.
Yeah. But our anniversary's not till the 53rd.
Oh, why?
Yeah. Well, think of it this way. Your birthday is on a certain day, right?
Uh-huh.
And there's 365 days in the year. Uh-huh. So on day 365, it's the day before your birthday, if your birthday is day 1.
It makes sense.
All right, fine. I'm just going to trust you guys. So fine. Never mind. Happy birthday next week.
Yeah, totally. And thank you for the wishes, by the way.
You're welcome.
Where's my present?
It's about to be delivered in the form of this episode.
Okay.
And this is a juicy, enticing episode.
It's an okay one. Yeah. It's actually a listener suggestion from way back. Probably one of our first listener suggestions.
Yeah, it's an old one.
Yeah, we got it via Reddit, actually, from a user named O and 8.
Mm-hmm.
O and 8.
Yeah. O ampersand 8?
No, it's
O
and 8. O and 8. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Sorry, it took me so long to get to this.
Well, actually, let's be honest. I remember we all said Joe would probably do this story, so it's really Joe's fault that we haven't done the story yet.
Yeah, that's true.
So I've been a slacker. Now this one was a little too overwhelming and confusing. It's one of these ones where how to put it? It got its start, and pretty soon, like everything but the kitchen sink was in there.
Yeah, that's why I have this handy-dandy bullet point list of all the things that I think are hilarious attached to them.
So what are we talking about?
We're going to talk about the Montauk Project.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, its sister project, the Philadelphia
experiment. We're going to go ahead and gloss over the Philadelphia experiment today.
But it's
know that it's connected.
Involved, yes.
Apparently it's connected.
Well,
Through the space-time continuum, it's connected.
It's connected in that it exists in the same universe, probably. But I
it could also be
figured
connected to the Istol woman and to
you know what?
Jefferson Davis 8.
This could explain. This is why it's your birthday gift, Steve, is because it could actually explain all of the 52 mysteries we have thus far tackled.
Woohoo!
Yeah. Anyways, I just figured we would gloss over the Philadelphia Project, save it for a rainy day.
All right.
Because it's too big for little old me to handle.
It is kind of a big, tangled mess.
Yeah. The Montauk Project, I'm saying that right?
Montauk?
Montauk? Sounds right to me.
Is this series of secret U.S. government projects that were conducted at, I think, as far as I can tell, it's the same place. It's Camp Hero, which was renamed the Montauk Air Force Station, right? Camp Hero became...
no, the other way around. I think that there was a Montauk Air Force Station, and then they donated the land to the county or something.
I thought
to Nassau County, and then they turned it into a park.
Right, but Camp Hero was during the World Wars. It was an army base.
Yeah, it was,
and then it became an Air Force base. Then they donated it to be a state park.
Right.
Okay, I'll buy that.
It's in Montauk, Long Island. Apparently, it existed for the purpose of developing psychological warfare techniques and exotic research into time travel.
Yeah.
Or...
don't forget mind control and mind reading.
Yeah, well, I feel like that's psychological warfare, kind of, right? Or alternately, there was a Stargate there, and Nikola Tesla and some aliens probably made it.
Entirely possible.
I'm laughing at that, but we'll talk about it in a minute.
Yes.
Tesla does have a role in this.
So I'm going to tell you guys a little story.
Okay.
Hop in the not so Wayback Machine. We're not going to hop in the Wayback Machine.
Nah.
We just took it out last week. We got to.
Yeah, it's in the shop.
Can't ever do that.
So in 1945, American troops liberated France. Right? That's true. We know that. That's not really a conspiracy. Apparently, at the same time, some troops discovered a train full of Nazi gold that was stopped in a tunnel. They notified the proper authorities, who arrived on the scene, took the gold, and then killed all the soldiers because dead men tell no tales.
I couldn't. So were these the soldiers that discovered it that were U.S. soldiers or soldiers that were already on the train? Because I thought I heard it was Nazi soldiers that they killed.
Oh, I understood it that
I
it
thought
was.
They were Allied soldiers that they killed.
I that's why I'm asking, because I remember thinking I read that it was they killed all the Nazi soldiers.
Well, I think they probably just killed everyone.
Well, yeah.
I mean, if there were Nazi soldiers, certainly they killed them. But I'm given to understand they also killed the Allied soldiers.
This is a release of Call of Duty, basically, is what you're telling me right here?
Yeah.
One man survives.
You got to kill everybody and then teabag them.
So, the moral of the story is if you find a trainload of gold, you just, hide it and don't tell anybody,
You national secret? Oh, my gosh. Yeah. What's that?
National treasure?
Yeah, national treasure it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm on it.
Okay.
Okay, also at the same time, during the crumbling Reich, right? That's how you say that word?
Oh, yeah.
The Third Reich?
The Third Reich. I just, you know what? Sometimes I can't say words. It's fine. Yeah. We know this. Americans were helping German scientists flee the country, which we also recognize as probably being true or absolutely being true.
And I don't know how many we got out before the war's end, but we certainly grabbed a bunch of them after the war was over, too.
Can I interrupt something?
Fine.
All right, because we're talking about this
Operation Paperclip.
Paperclip, and we're talking about the Germans a little bit here. I'm guessing that some of the weird German experiments are why we took these guys.
Yeah.
So did you guys see the article that's come out recently about Hitler and Himmler and the awesome stuff that they wanted to do, making their own Jurassic Park?
No, what?
I didn't hear about that one.
Yeah, it's so funny, and evidently this is quote unquote true papers that have been discovered. Is that to help show that the German lineage had been there, was always the strong people. What they were going to do is they were going to backwards engineer some it's a bull or some kind of cow that was 7 feet tall that was from the Jurassic period, and release it into the wilds of Poland so that these strong men of the Reich could hunt them. Because that's right up there with the crazy stuff that we're going to talk about that these guys were in.
I guess I feel like if I had a lot of money and was planning on taking over the world, I would probably build a Jurassic Park.
Yeah. I think they ought to build a real Jurassic Park.
I think they probably should.
Cool. We saw how well that worked in film number 1 through 4.
Well, obviously we wouldn't be dummies.
The movies aren't realistic.
Anyways, back to our story.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Operation Paperclip.
Operation Paperclip.
And lots of these scientists were brought back to America and teamed up with scientists who'd worked on the Philadelphia experiment, given the Nazi gold that we were just talking about.
Why were they given the Nazi gold?
And a research facility that was built underground, and that became the Montauk Project.
Yeah, built in a 12-story underground complex.
Maybe, yeah. We'll talk about what they built under there in a minute.
Yeah, I know.
Because it turns out, apparently, the government, though they have given all of the land to the Forest Service, they still own the land below the radar unit that sits on top of the Montauk Project.
Yeah.
Apparently.
That's true, but I think what that meant really is that they kept the mineral rights just in case, gold was discovered or something like that. And I'm not talking Nazi gold. But
gold were discovered.
Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. But why did they give them the Nazi gold?
Oh, to pay them and to fund their research?
But why didn't they just get some money from the treasury?
Well, because it was this Nazi gold.
You have free gold.
Nazis like Nazi gold?
Well, I don't know. I think you have to launder it somehow. You can't just go to the bank and say, "Hey, here's all this Nazi gold. We're gonna keep it."
Just melt it down.
I guess you probably could. You are the U.S. government.
It's a little easier just to melt it down.
That's probably a question. I don't have a good answer.
Okay.
Sorry. I can keep making things up if you want.
No?
We'll move on? Okay.
Okay.
The base is all the way at the end of this island.
Yeah, the east end of Long Island.
Yeah. For people who live on Long Island, you follow Route 27. I don't know what that means.
It's a point. It's kind of a spit of land.
It's kind of, if you look at Google Maps, the highway goes out on the south side of the island, and then Montauk Point is there's this little blob at the very, very end. So it's wide, then it narrows down to this very narrow, skinny little passageway, and it widens out again, and that's where Camp Hero and all that other stuff is.
Yeah, so in World War II, it was called Camp Hero, and it was used for coastal defense, had really big guns.
Well, it's got the big radar station on it.
Well, now.
Oh, did they have guns on it?
They had large guns and bunkers, and then the Army gave the base to the Air Force, and it became known as the Montauk Air Force Station, and they built this big radar. If you Google Montauk Project, and actually we'll put up some pictures on the website too, that huge radar thing is what we're talking about. Yeah. Apparently, it was used as an actual radar station
briefly until it became
in
obsolete.
the Cold War.
And what kind of? Do you remember what kind of radar it is? It starts with an S.
I thought it was an AH-356 or something like that. I really can't remember.
Yeah,
it was a technology that, as soon as they built it, was out of date and was no longer worth anything.
Yeah, it was I had the chance to go on board an old 50s era submarine that was called the Sailfish. And it was built as a radar picket boat because radars weren't small enough to put on planes that could land on aircraft carriers. But the aircraft carriers needed radar coverage, so they built a series of submarines that had these enormous sails and these retractable radar dishes and everything, so they could be a distance out with their radars on, monitoring for incoming enemy planes and everything. And then before I don't think they even did much time in service, and then they became obsolete. And so, what do we do with this thing? Well, I guess we'll just turn it into a regular submarine with a really huge, huge sail on it. So that's what they did.
For fun.
Yeah, that's what they did.
Because we can.
No sense throwing it away.
Yeah, according to the legend, I guess, the base lost its funding in the 1960s because the radar technology became obsolete.
Yeah.
But apparently it was open until 1983.
Because they were doing experiments.
I guess. And as Joe previously stated, it's a New York State park now.
Yeah.
But the radar equipment is still intact and standing.
You can actually see it on Google Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of cool, yeah.
Well, and people use it rather than the lighthouse that's on Montauk Point. They use the radar as kind of a daytime reference point because it's easier to see than a lighthouse.
Yeah.
It's big.
So it's really big. And, as I said before, the story is that they actually built bunkers below it, built down, and that the government retains the rights to that whether it's actually not improved down there and it's minerals or what have you. Apparently, the U.S. government still owns whatever's below. So apparently, if in fact there is something below there, it's the base itself, and the radar was actually a cover-up for what was below. Apparently, there were as many as 12 stories deep. I don't know, what do you call it when it's not...
Levels?
Levels deep.
12 levels, I guess, yeah.
Some people say that it's like really, really documented that there's a subterranean city beneath the base that's still being used today by secret branches of the military. People say that the radar equipment was built as a cover-up, that the military could conduct experiments in time travel and mind control, and that the electronics equipment was a cover for that. People also say that there's a 50-foot tall pure titanium pyramid under there, so I guess we'll take what people say with a little bit of a grain of salt.
You think so?
Why a titanium pyramid?
I don't know. I was thinking like it would make more sense to say it was gold, and then that's what they used the Nazi gold for. But
trainload of Nazi gold to make a pretty big pyramid.
Yeah, but I don't know why pure titanium, because it conducts space-time antimatter better. I don't know.
Radio frequency waves, as somebody said.
Yeah.
I gotta say, if you're gonna build a 12-level underground complex, that seems like a really inappropriate place to do it.
Yeah, it's pretty close to the water.
Where's the water table is pretty close to the surface there. Yeah. It just seems like there's a lot easier places to build.
I agree.
I mean, it's conceivable, but you'd think they'd go like hollow out a mountain or something like that, or maybe pick a dormant volcano and build their lair in there.
Maybe they needed the seawater.
Yeah, good point.
Maybe.
Oh, I want to point something out too. And
sure.
I'm ashamed of all the people out there that have gone over this story so many times for not noticing this obvious thing. But only 20 miles away to the northwest is Groton, Connecticut, home of a U.S. submarine base. And it's entirely possible they were smuggling Nazi gold, scientists, and everything else via submarine across the Long Island Sound to a secret subterranean submarine base underneath the complex.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah.
I get it. Actually, that's a really with the breakthrough theory. That's a really good theory.
Oh, absolutely, totally. But because when you think about it, why would they pick this particular spot? It's in such a populous area. Even though for the area, it's somewhat deserted, but it's such a populous area. You know, why don't they go out somewhere in New Mexico, in the middle of the desert somewhere? Well, think about it. What's 20 miles away? A submarine base. I know it makes no sense. But.
No, actually, I mean, it makes more sense than a lot of stuff we're going to talk about tonight.
Well, I think that when you're talking about 12-level underground complexes, I think a secret subterranean submarine base is kind of a necessary thing. I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Interesting. So here's the story, kind of. I'm sorry. Here's the theory, the kind of overarching theory. Of what happened here, or what was happening here. I don't know. There's a lot of these. This is the one that I like the most. I feel like there's a lot here.
So you're going to lead with your favorite and then just trail down from there? Is that what you're
I mean, the rest of them are just kind of like weird assertions. Like nobody has spent very much time to kind of give anecdotal evidence or anything like that.
The rest of them are assertions? This one isn't?
Well, okay, this one is too, but there's anecdotal evidence that goes with it. Whereas the other ones I can bullet point down.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
So, on or about August 12th, 1983, all credible stories start with on or about. Just throw that out there. A porthole in time, quote unquote, was created which allowed researchers to travel anywhere in space or time. This was developed into a stable, quote, time tunnel. Because of this...
Which went to a single point in the past?
Well, no. They could kind of control it, maybe. It's unclear. There are two kind of variations on what happened specifically because of this. In the first instance, they both kind of have the same thing to kind of have... Well, let's just start talking about this.
Okay.
All right.
So because of this time tunnel...
Oh, by the way, was this a really long tunnel? I mean, did you need like a golf cart to get down it?
Joe, you stop it.
Sorry.
Because of this time tunnel, either the time travel project at Montauk interlocked in hyperspace with the original Philadelphia experiment in 1943, the story tends to go thusly. The USS Aldridge, that was in the Philadelphia experiment, I guess.
Yep.
I don't know. Was drawn into hyperspace and trapped there. 2 men, Al, how do you say his last name?
Bielek, I think.
Bielek and Duncan Cameron both claim to have leaped from the deck of the USS Eldridge while it was in hyperspace and ended up, after a period of severe disorientation, at Camp Hero in the year 1983 at the Montauk Project. They claim to have met John von Neumann. That's how you would say that, right? That's how I say that.
Or John von Neumann.
It's Von.
Von Neumann.
He's a physicist and mathematician. He died in 1957.
But they met him in 1983.
Met him in 1983. Just calm down.
Yeah.
He apparently, that scientist von Neumann, also was apparently connected to the Philadelphia experiment. So the claim is that they actually, in Montauk, the time tunnel opened up into the Philadelphia experiment. Maybe. Apparently, the origin of the Montauk Project dates also to 1943, when radar invisibility was being researched aboard the USS Eldridge. I don't know. It's kind of this modge podge of story that I can't totally tell.
Here's the easy way to think about the Philadelphia experiment.
Yes.
They wanted to figure out how to make a ship invisible to radar.
Mm-hmm.
They did some kooky science, and some kids in a van got involved. Okay, no, that part's not real.
No.
They have a dog.
But they accidentally made the ship disappear for a couple of moments. It completely went invisible to the naked eye and radar. It traveled through time, and then it zipped back to where it came from, and people were dead because they had fused with the ship or were completely loony.
Yeah, mentally unfit.
That's the simple Cliff Notes version of the Philadelphia experiment.
Sure. So apparently, where the ship ended up was the Montauk Project. Apparently, it.
So that would explain a lot, though. So when it disappears, that's because the Montauk thing is causing it to go like whoop.
And I can't decide if the theory is that the Philadelphia experiment caused the time tunnel opening, or if the Montauk experiment caused the USS Eldridge to disappear.
But somehow they made it up that 40-year bridge.
Yeah, apparently.
And then what's his name jumped off the ship and wound up in Montauk.
Yeah, what's his name? Al
and Duncan.
Bielek and Duncan Cameron.
Yeah.
And I can't tell. You guys said that you watched some interviews with him. Is that true?
I listened to part of an interview with saying his name.
I guess.
Yeah.
Bielek, okay. And
I couldn't totally tell if he claimed to have been part of the Philadelphia experiment in 1943.
He did. It's really weird. He claims that he was on that ship in 43.
And then he jumped off in Montauk.
And he jumped off while it was traveling through hyperspace. So he looked at his buddy Richard Dean Anderson and said, "I'm out of here," and jumped out while he was in the wormhole. And he traveled in time. He says he ended up in the year 2300 and something and was there for a while. And then he ended up in the year 2800 and something and lived there for a while. Both times having no recollection of who he was at first, and then eventually figuring it out, and then somehow traveling back in time and ending up in 1983.
I see. And then when he was in, say, the year 2800, he lived there for a while?
Yeah, he was a tour guide.
He was a tour guide?
He was a tour guide because they had cities that were 22 or 2,300 stories tall. And they had anti-gravity technology, and they had computers that ran the government, and as he said, they were a socialist society. There's a lot of weird stuff in his stuff. Anybody who wants to listen to it, there's a bunch of his interviews online. I didn't listen to all of them, but it's about 3 hours of interviews. There's a couple of them that are kind of compiled. It's literally a 3-hour video that you can just listen to, and most of it's just audio. But I'm not going to say that he's a kook or a loon or anything like that, but he makes some pretty fantastic claims, and most of his stories are really, really simple. Like he says, well, then they had train systems, except their train cars were wider than ours. Okay, it's a train. okay, well, what's so futuristic about a train? I mean, it's some weird stuff, very simple. I almost wonder if he, accidentally did LSD or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
accidentally.
It sounds like, the thing about it is like, and this is why he's full of it, is because he traveled to the future. And think about this. I mean, if somebody from say 200 years ago transported to our time, he would see things that would have been inconceivable in his time.
Mm-hmm.
Not just that, he wouldn't have just seen things that would have been an improvement. He wouldn't have seen a donkey on steroids and a super turbocharged steam locomotive. He would see things like airplanes and iPads, and the internet. He would see stuff that his society could not have conceived of. I'll be like, in all of his stories, not a single thing that he saw so many centuries in the future, not a single thing that he saw is something that doesn't already exist in our society today.
Yeah.
Which tells us that either all human creativity basically disappeared about right about now, or that the guy is just basically full of it.
Well, and he also makes the jump that the human world population was kind of decimated at some point in the near future in some war, and
that seems like the sort of thing you would get some serious details on.
Well, and do you remember the Georgia Guidestones?
Yeah,
he talks about the New World Order, and that in the year 2800. The planet was at, what was it, 500,000 or 500 million? 500 million people? Mm-hmm. They were keeping the population right around that number. So it's...
When did he do these interviews? I should just go watch them.
They're several years ago. It was really hard. I thought it was from 2000.
He's dead, though, right?
Yeah, he is.
2010, right? Or something
something like that, yeah. So his interview was, he was talking about the internet, and it was strange because I swore I heard the internet at one point they said 2012. But then he would start talking about the early 2000s, so I couldn't tell exactly when the interview I listened to was. But it just was very, very close to what modern technology was. And I agree with Joe. They weren't revelations. They weren't amazing. They had a sidewalk where you stood on it and just jetted you around town. Like the thing at the airport.
And like the thing that Isaac Asimov was writing and had in some of his robot novels that he wrote in the 1960s.
Do you remember I borrowed the Ringworld series from you?
Larry Niven.
Larry Niven. And if anybody hasn't read Ringworld or Larry Niven, they're good books. They're sci-fi.
Oh, yeah, they're classics.
But they were written before a lot of technology came out. And so the technology that he forecasted was very simple advances. And that's what this guy was talking about, was things that were very simple advances, but they were 600 or 800 years in the future. So,
And also, if the world is only 500 million people, then why do you need cities that are like 2,400 stories tall?
Yeah, well, they had anti-gravity, and they could just float all over the planet and live wherever they wanted in that city.
That's what it was.
So, you know what? This week we're in Rio. Next week we're in the Antarctic.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They have ships like that you can live on.
Yeah.
They do.
They do. So, okay, that sidebar, I guess.
We've gone off. I think we bashed Al enough.
We have. So either this whole fusion with the Philadelphia Project or aliens. I guess they're not mutually exclusive. They could have both happened. But aliens, apparently there was some contact with aliens that happened at the Montauk Project through this time tunnel, this stable time tunnel. There were some underground tunnels with abandoned cultural archives that were explored on Mars using the technique where apparently some kind of Martians had once lived thousands and thousands of years earlier. And there was contact made with the aliens through the time tunnel, I guess, that gave them some kind of advanced technologies to enhance the Montauk Project.
But they were able to actually do the initial time tunnel without alien technology.
I guess.
They stumbled upon it.
And then the time tunnel also opened into a space tunnel that also took us to Mars. I think it's one thing for me to make the leap of, hey, this time tunnel opened up and it opened up to some place that's pretty close, just 40 years ago or whatever. It's another to say, hey, this time tunnel opened up, and it opened up 5,000 years in the future on Mars. I don't know how those things work, but
I don't know. I mean, that's the thing about it is like the universe is a huge place, and actually inhabitable places that exist are an infinitesimally small portion of the universe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So if it goes up to a random place, it's probably just going to be empty space. Or the inside of a planet, or the inside of a star.
Yeah, those all seem like really dangerous things too, right? Every time you hear about a time tunnel opening up, it happens to be in a place that isn't the vacuum of space that sucks the entire world through this time tunnel into a black hole, right? I mean, that seems rather convenient to me.
Well, they did that on Stargate once.
That's true.
They had to frantically shut down the Stargate, but that happened on Stargate, which, by the way, I'm going to go back to Stargate every time you say time tunnel, because it sounds like it.
So they were just like channel surfing, and they came to this one that was like a black hole or something.
Yeah, they went to this planet, and it had the ring, and that planet was being sucked into a black hole, and the guys that went out there were all being spaghettification. Is that what it's called when you get sucked into a black hole because you're stretched out?
Let's go with that.
And time slows down, and so they were watching everybody slow down and being spaghettified. They had to quickly shut it down so the gravity didn't suck the world through the through the gate.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I'm just telling you right now. I'm going to do that every time I can.
Apparently, this allowed a broader access to hyperspace, and also allowed a language of hyperspace to be developed. I just don't even...
Is that kind of like Esperanto?
I was about to say, what does that language sound like?
Language of hyperspace.
Or is that like a mathematical language?
It's unclear. I have to be honest. It may be a language of mathematics. I did not try to look it up. I gotta be honest with you.
I don't know that we could, actually.
So there's some other stuff that's really interesting, and this is kind of my bullet point list. The first interesting fact connected to the Montauk Project, other than the ones that we've already talked about, are that apparently Nikola Tesla faked his death in a conspiracy and was the chief director of operations at the Montauk Project, and was through the 80s, which would make him like 120
something like that,
years old. So that seems really true.
I gotta say, but he was when he died. I think he was in his 80s, like his early 80s. Right? And I've seen pictures of him not long before his death, and he didn't look that hot. He didn't look so good.
No, he did not.
And reportedly, he was getting a little bit flaky in the head in his old age, as most of us do.
Yeah, especially when you play with electricity as much as he did.
Yeah. So I'm not sure he would have been much use to the project.
However happy I would be that Nikola Tesla was still alive today.
Oh, yeah.
I would be so happy.
Well, haven't you watched Sanctuary? He's a vampire. He's totally alive. You've never seen that show? Oh, I'm totally going off on random TV shows today, aren't I?
Never even heard of this show.
Sanctuary ran for like 3 years, but Nikola Tesla was a vampire.
I guess I'll go watch that then.
I'm
gonna just
pretty rad.
Watch it tonight.
He's a super smart guy.
Yeah. Thomas Edison is another vampire. That'd be great.
No, Edison was a vampire. He was just a jerk.
Yeah. I heard he was kind of a jerk.
He really was.
Okay, next little tidbit of conspiracy. There are reports from the 1970s that surveillance showed, quote, the formation of a large bubble of time-space centered upon the site, unquote, which is apparently proof of the time tunnel. Apparently there was pictorial proof of that, which conveniently was burgled from the only person who had it, which seems like a normal thing for satellite surveillance.
Well, yeah, that guy was. I remember that.
He was a reporter, right?
Yeah.
No, he was a Russian.
Yeah, he was a defector from Russia.
Oh, he was interviewed by a reporter. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
and he had access to satellite surveillance
technology. And he was like Russian and South American. He was some weird combination, Spanish-Russian, something like that. And as soon as he spilled the beans, then they broke into his apartment and only stole the papers.
Yeah, I know. No, they could have like messed the place up and stole his TV too, just to cover up.
Yeah, but no,
well,
just the papers.
I seriously would like to know from.
Why would you steal the TV? You know how heavy a 1970s TV is?
True.
They were only about this big. But anyway, I really want to know what a bubble of space-time looks like.
I would like to know that too.
Because how does it look any different from the space-time that we exist in right now?
I don't know. Maybe it bows out. I don't know. Maybe
It's like a
everything
soap
looks
bubble.
super spaghettified.
Cool refractions? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That I can't answer. I have not seen that on TV yet.
Yeah. Apparently, also at the Montauk Project, people had their psychic abilities enhanced already. Amazing theory. That allowed them to materialize objects out of thin air.
Yeah. Well,
they could just think a thing into existence.
Yeah, I guess they couldn't all do that, but some of them were so incredibly advanced and powerful that they could actually and one of them like materialize a Bigfoot out of thin air.
A Yeti. And it went berserker and started destroyed like 3 levels, and they had to
shoot it.
Yeah.
Did you hear the theory of why the Yeti was created?
No.
Or was brought in?
No.
Oh, this is way down the rabbit hole.
Gold? It's gold?
It's absolute
it's
gold.
It's Nazi gold?
I can't remember the name of the guy that supposedly had his psychic abilities enhanced, and of course, by having those abilities enhanced, he had other issues like emotional issues created. But he and some other people at that time, I think it was in the 80s, they said, because it shut down in 83, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Said that they realized that the project had gotten out of control. And so what they did is to shut it down. When he was in, they had a mind chair where it was an alien chair that would enhance
Professor X.
Your powers. Yeah.
Yep, which is also a Stargate phenomena. He sat in it and he thought of the worst monster he could, and he thought of a 7-foot Yeti which went through and rampaged through the complex and ripped the place asunder.